Okay, we're ready to go.
Thank you. I would now like to call the August 16th, 2023 Longmont Sustainability Advisory Board meeting to order. Could we please start with a roll call?
Yes, Kate Collardson,
Present.
Jim Metcalf,
I'm present.
Mary Lynn,
Present.
Michelle Roth,
Present.
Charles Musgrave,
Present.
Robert Davidson,
Here.
Ralph Grosswald,
Here.
Lisa Knobloch,
Here.
Becky Doyle,
Here.
Francie Jaffe,
Here.
Susan Bartlett,
Here.
Daryl Hahn,
Here.
Nicole Manesh.
Here.
And Heather McIntyre is here. Councilmember Martin.
Here.
And then we have with us from Platte River, we have Javier Camacho, Masood Ahmad, Lee Gibson, and Kari Lynch with us, who will be joining us for the general business item in a little bit. But Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. I will now read our land acknowledgement statement. Now, we acknowledge that Longmont sits on the traditional territory of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Ute, and other indigenous peoples. We honor the history and the living and spiritual connection that the First Peoples have with this land. It is our commitment to face the injustices that happened when the land was taken, and to educate our communities, ourselves, and our children to ensure that these injustices do not happen again. And I will then read our inclusion statement. The Sustainability Advisory Board embraces diverse perspectives from its members and the public. To create an inclusive space where everyone feels welcome to share their opinion, the board asks that all attendees listen and speak with respect and avoid attacks on individuals or specific group identities. And that brings us to approval of minutes from the last meeting. Were there any amendments that needed to be made, or is there a motion to approve?
I'll move that we approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Great.
I will second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And anyone opposed? And Mary, you're abstaining?
Yeah, I wasn't here.
Great, thank you. Okay, are there any revisions to the agenda or documents that needed to be submitted from the staff?
Nope.
Great, thanks. Then that takes us on to general business. A reminder to the board to please hold comments and questions until the end of each presentation after staff has finished presenting. And we're going to hear from Platte River Power Authority about the IRP update, and I will turn the floor over to Javier and Masood.
Okay, great. Good evening, everyone. I am very happy to be here, and it's good to meet everyone virtually. If I have not had the pleasure of meeting you all in person, I really hope that one day soon we can. But I also wanted to quickly just say a huge thanks to Longmont Power and Communications and the rest of the staff on the city side, just really helping us coordinate today's meeting and today's presentation. So Daryl, Susan, Scott, as well as Lisa in the sustainability office. It's been really great working with everyone to get on today's agenda. And as Heather mentioned, we have other team members on the call as well today. And so you'll be hearing from Masood here in a moment after I get to our introduction. But we do also have Lee Gibson, our Senior External Affairs Specialist. She just joined the team not too long ago, but she's been really awesome and integral in setting up a lot of these presentations and really establishing our outreach effort. And that's been supported heavily by Kari Lynch, another one of our team members, our senior communications and marketing specialist, who's also on the call, along with many other team members. So it's just a pleasure to be with you all today. We're eager to go through today's presentation, and we're happy to take any questions that you may have at the end of the presentation. And if we don't have the answers this evening, we are going to work very hard to get them out to you as well. But we'll go ahead and jump into the presentation. I am on my iPad where I don't have the presentation, so I'm wondering if I could actually
I've
get
got the presentation for you. Let me pull it up for you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Heather. I appreciate that. I thought, oh boy, if I have to do this on my iPad, I'm gonna have to work some miracles. Because I was just telling my team member, I'm like, Zoom never gives me an issue on my laptop. And then all of a sudden it happens today. Great. Well, so are you controlling the slides, Heather, or do I have the ability to do that?
I'll control them for you. So if you can just indicate when you're ready for the next one, I can get you going.
Perfect. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. So I'm Javier Camacho, and I joined Platte River Power Authority a little over a year now. I came up from Texas, very happy to now call myself a Colorado resident. And so I actually live really close to Longmont. I'm not quite in Longmont, but I live very close to it. But I have the pleasure of enjoying Longmont and everything it has to offer, since it's the biggest city next to us. I'm here at Platte River. I'm the Director of Public and External Affairs, Strategic Communications, and Social Marketing. So anyone who can say that 10 times fast, you are one of my friends. But I work very closely with our resource planning team, headed up by Masood, who, like I said, will be presenting here in a bit. But on our next slide, we have just a really quick agenda. We'll be talking about Platte River. I know many of you have worked with Platte River, I'm sure in some capacity, have heard of us, of course, but we definitely want to take this opportunity to really talk about who we are as a utility and, how we're evolving in the midst of great change that our industry is encountering, what it's encountering, as well as just global change. So we'll be talking a little bit about that, and then I'll hand it off to Masood, where he'll talk specifically about our next IRP, the Integrated Resource Plan for 2024, and other items that we have coming up on that. On the next slide, we'll showcase how we have ways you can engage with us. We definitely want you all to know, as well as your constituency and other community members who you feel may want to participate in this conversation, may not be part of this evening's presentation, but they're out there and they want to communicate with us. These are great platforms to do that. So we have our webpage. It's prpa.org/2024 IRP, as well as our fall community meeting that is coming up. And we are going to be announcing the details of that next community meeting very soon. And so we will be sure to keep you all informed, as well as the staff over at Longmont as well. And then if you have any questions, please feel free to email us at 2024IRP@prpa.org. We also have a live FAQ document that we uploaded to our IRP website, which again is at that URL. And we are constantly updating that FAQ. We also have it in English and in Spanish, as well as the entire website. So those are just ways where you can stay informed and connected with us as we go through this process. So let's go ahead and just jump into Platte River and talk a little bit about who we are. I really like this image. We worked very hard. I know it's a very simple image when you at first glance, but it tells a deeper story. It's paired with our 50th. This year, it's our 50th anniversary. It's a really proud moment that we share across the entire region that we serve. Of course, including Longmont, right along with Fort Collins, Estes Park, and Loveland. And of course, over 50 years ago, these four municipalities came together and really made a trailblazing decision to really take hold of their energy future, knowing far in advance at that time how much the Northern Colorado region would grow, how much change it would encounter, and understanding the dynamics of what they would possibly encounter, like their energy and where it comes from. Of course, water was at the crux of what this energy production looked like. And so creating and establishing Platte River as the entity that would draw together all the resources that would be necessary to manage the growth of the 4 municipalities. Now, although when you zoom out, right, Northern Colorado is one region, but once you dig deeper, we can all say, because we all live here, that it's very nuanced, it's very different. And so Platte River, of course, over its 5 decades, has really worked very hard to meet the growing and diverse needs of each municipality. And so the 4 municipalities come together, they form Platte River Power Authority in 1973, and now Platte River has been working and will continue to work really hard in order to meet the needs and really serve the energy that our region deserves. And so this is just an integral visual, also underscoring the fact that it's the leaders of each of these municipalities that really help direct where Platte River goes strategically. The mayors of each of the municipalities, as well as the utility directors, also sit on our Platte River Board of Directors. Of course, Longmont is the exception when it comes to the utility directors. And so knowing that Dave and Daryl work very closely together, but Dave, who is now, as you all know, the assistant city manager over at Longmont, he still sits on our board as well. So, but we have great communication with the Longmont Power and Communications staff, working very closely with Daryl and his team. So again, this is just a great visual to showcase how we all need to work together in order to strive for a stronger energy future. A little bit more about Platte River. So on the next slide, we have that we are deeply grounded and rooted in our community. There's a lot of information that's on this slide, but I'm going to draw our attention to just 4 major items. The first thing is Platte River Power Authority. We are not-for-profit, community-owned public power utility. And I say that with absolute pride. I came from an investor-owned utility in Texas, and that is a totally different structure. At the end of the day, we're all utilities serving the energy needs of our customers, but there is a great deal of pride when it comes down to being a public power utility. We are community owned. And the second thing I want to draw your attention to is the fact that we have nearly 300 employees that make up the Platte River DNA. And what's great about that is that the vast majority of these team members who work every day to serve out the vision and mission of Platte River live within the 4 owner communities that we serve: Estes Park, Longmont, Loveland, and Fort Collins. And so that is definitely a point of pride that we have. And if we don't live in the 4 owner communities, we're right here constantly serving within the Northern Colorado region. The third thing I want to draw our attention to is on the right side of the screen, 3rd bullet down, is that about 33% of our current portfolio comes from renewable energy. And based on the resource diversification policy that our board passed in 2018, which I'll get to that in a bit, really sets us on a path to drive that number even higher, really integrating more renewables and supporting that while balancing the reliability factor, which is the 4th thing I want to draw our attention to, is our foundational pillars. Built into that paragraph at the top of the slide, you'll find on the 2nd line that we work every single day to deliver safe, reliable, environmentally responsible, and financially sustainable energy and services to our entire service region. And we have to work very hard to balance all of those factors as we continue to evolve as a utility. So those are constant conversations that we have on every single level. Going to the next slide, continuing with who Platte River is, we are now on a trailblazing path based on what our board did back in 2018, the resource diversification policy. There's a lot of fun facts on the RDP. But really quickly, before I jump into those, the purpose, of course, is to provide guidance for our resource planning, our portfolio diversification, and carbon reduction. Just when you look across utilities across the country, we have a very diverse portfolio, a portfolio that we should be really proud of. As we do that, the goal of the resource diversification policy is to proactively work towards a 100% decarbonization resource mix by 2030. Now, the fun fact here, and you may already know this because I typically say this at different presentations, but at the time when our board officially adopted the resource diversification policy in 2018, it was by far the most aggressive and advanced decarbonization plan ever announced publicly by any electric utility in the United States. Now, today, we are second. There is one utility who did come out after we announced their plan. And so they're slightly more aggressive than we are, and they're a California utility. But, you know, I typically say, I'm like, well, of course, it's in California, right? They're usually on the cutting edge of these types of technologies. But, you know, at the end of the day, in the state of Colorado, we definitely are trailblazing this path. Now, the state of Colorado, back in 2019, did announce a mandate that all electric utilities need to hit a decarbonization goal, right? And so we actually ended up predating that mandate, that state mandate, with this announcement in 2018. Now, what have we done since then, and what are we doing, and what's on the horizon? Well, on the right side of the screen lays that out. We have officially joined a regional market. We were very specific in that a regional market must exist in order for our RDP to succeed and to continue on this path of our decarbonization efforts. And so we have joined the Southwest Power Pool WEISS market and the Western Energy Imbalance System market. And so we just joined that market on April 1st, and it's a learning curve for us. You know, we were with a joint dispatch authority prior to that, and you know, we knew how to work that system and navigate ourselves. Now we're in a totally different type of market, and so we've joined SPP's WEISS market to really teach us the ways of how to navigate the day-ahead market, so that way in 2026, which we have already made a commitment to joining SPP's RTO West market, the Regional Transmission Organizations West market in 2026. So this is to give us the platform and the runway to really understand how to navigate a power market, so that way we can support a lot of the efforts that we're planning out, and a little some of that will come up with Masood's presentation. There are many things that are currently in the works as we speak. We are continuing to look at our infrastructure, both on the transmission and on the distribution side. You know, we definitely need to ensure that as we continue to electrify our region, that our infrastructure can support that transition as well. That's incredibly important, as well as developing new systems that are currently not in place. We'll briefly touch on it, but distributed energy resources, you know, developing this system so that way we're able to work across each owner community as well as Platte River, and then how that impacts our customers, the customers that Longmont Power and Communications and every other distribution utility serves, and how that needs to become more of a relationship and less of a transaction. You know, I even remember when a utility, you simply received a bill from an electric utility or any other utility for that matter, and then you paid the bill, they provided the service, and you pay the bill. And that was basically your relationship with them. That is changing. You know, customers are putting solar panels on their roofs. You have electric vehicles. How can that come into play? You know, now we have smart meters, of course, and then there are smart thermostats. There's a lot of data that can be collected around that. And so now there's this idea of prosumer, right? And so what is that relationship with the customer, and how we manage that and build that into our plan? So taking a look at those systems, and then of course, technology. That is going to be something we have to keep a strong pulse on. Battery technology is an evolving space. Short-term duration battery storage is of course out there. In fact, we have 2 megawatts of battery storage out at our rawhide generation station in Wellington, which is great. And we're able to understand how that functions, but we're really keeping an eye on long duration battery storage. And then of course, the utilization of other types of energy storage, thermal and water and other technologies that are emerging as we speak, but not quite fully developed and matured. On the next slide, we're going to take a look at the foundational pillars. And I underscored this earlier, so always keeping an eye as we continue to evolve that we need to balance reliability, ensuring that that connectivity is there. So when you flip the switch, when you plug in your car, or when you want to stay cool and comfortable in your house, that you have the power you need. Environmentally responsible. I'm proud to say that since Platte River's inception, we actually started with the only dispatchable non-carbon emitting resource that was available and still is to this day, and that's hydropower. Of course, 5 decades later, we're now in the situation where hydropower is not quite as dependable as it used to be. And, you know, there is definitely a water crisis that's not just national, but globally. So looking at how we can continue to integrate renewable energy and create a clean energy future, but still balancing the reliability factor and while keeping it cost effective. So being financially sustainable. You know, this past legislative session at the state capitol, the General Assembly put together an entire committee to investigate rising utility costs. And, you know, rightfully so, costs are going up across the spectrum, not just for utilities, in addition to the lingering impacts of the pandemic, plus inflation. There's a lot of factors here. So we have to be very sensitive to the inevitability of rate increases, but also how we finesse that over the progress that we must make. And so the financial sustainability factor is going to be crucial. On the next slide, we'll take a look at our progress since 2018. I'll run through this very quickly. But our 2024 integrated resource plan really builds on the 2020 IRP that we did a very robust process through. And some of you may remember that. But since then, we've had some great successes, adding more wind to our portfolio, in addition to announcing purchase power agreements for solar. Obviously, we successfully filed our 2020 IRP, and now we're building on that. We also are looking at introducing more solar in addition to energy storage through requests for proposals, RFPs, that we currently have out right now. We successfully filed our clean energy plan through the state of Colorado, which was a mandate, but essentially we were taking what we already supplied to WAPA, the Western Area Power Administration, and we submitted that as a clean energy plan to the state of Colorado. And then of course, our entry into SPP's WISE market as well. On the next slide here, this is our energy portfolio, and we draw a very interesting comparison. So back in 2018, when our board first announced the resource diversification policy, this is what our energy portfolio looked like. About 25% came from non-carbon resources. Lots of dependency on coal, of course. You know, Rawhide Unit 1 turning 40 years old next year, another landmark for Platte River and for our region, and was also named Coal Plant of the Year across the country, underscoring how efficient and how responsible we are in managing that plant. We are also going to be decommissioning that Rawhide unit 16 to 18 years before its full retirement age. That is something electric utilities don't typically get to say. You know, electric utilities run infrastructure up to its retirement and sometimes even past that trying to get more mileage out of those units. Whereas Platte River, we're on the flip side. And so this again is a major success for us. So as we prep for the decommissioning of Rawhide Unit 1, which is at the conclusion of this decade, we need to prep on what the reliability will look like, right? And already we've seen some progress. So looking at our portfolio this year, we've seen a decrease dependency on coal. We definitely see a larger integration of wind with the addition of wind that we just spoke about. And then also taking a look at other areas of opportunity. This is where now we're around 33% of non-carbon resources. But let's take a look at another comparison. So on the next slide, we see a comparison of what our portfolio looks like today and what it will look like in the future. And this is definitely something we should all be, all very proud of. There's a lot of work that's going to be going into this as we make our way into 2030. And right now we are projecting roughly around 88% of non-carbon resources supporting the energy needs of our region, backed with the reliability factor of needing about 11.6% of dispatchable resources in order to support that. And really, this is just underscored by the sheer nature of how renewable resources work. The sun doesn't shine all the time, even not only when it's cloudy, but obviously at night, still needing to provide the power for our region. Wind doesn't blow all the time. And, when we hit those inclement weather moments, right? And how do we prep for that? And Masood's gonna jump into that area as well. And so on the next slide, we take a look at the timeline. And here, this is where I'll wrap up and I'll get ready to hand it off to Masood. But one thing that we definitely want to underscore that's slightly different from what we did back in 2020 when we did that IRP is that we are going to continue to be out in the community the entire time that we run through the IRP. The integrated resource plan is such an intricate process that we need to continue to be out in the community. And so this is certainly one platform. And if there's any other place you want us to go out and present, if there's another organization, another group, we're happy to be out there, working with your team over at Longmont Power Communications, or if you want to communicate directly with us, we're happy to coordinate that. But we are going to continue to be out through the community until we wrap up, and even beyond, but specifically with the IRP, when we wrap up next year in the spring. We will, like I said, have our next listening session or community meeting, I should say, in the fall of this year, which we will definitely get you those details as those get solidified. And then we'll have a third one in the spring as we begin to wrap up. And so this is what the timeline looks like. And of course, if you have any questions regarding that, happy to take those at the end. But just want to again say thank you so much for the time. Again, my name's Javier. Good to be with you all. And I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Masood, who will talk more about the work that's being done behind the scenes on the IRP, the studies, and what some of our challenges are. So Masood.
Well, thank you, Javier, and thank you very much the opportunity to present our work at the resource plan development. I'm a manager of resource planning. I've been with Platte River for the past 4 years. Before that, I worked with the two large Eastern utilities on the East Coast, Dominion Energy and a Southern Company. And my attraction to coming to Platte River is, of course, this area is beautiful, and the resource diversification policy, as Javier was saying, it is one of the most aggressive, still most aggressive in the country. And this area of the country is blessed with a lot of solar and wind. And so if anybody, we are rightly positioned to move towards that 100% goal before others. So with that, can we move to the next one, please? So IRP is an integrated resource planning process, is really is where we build a roadmap for our investment. So where we look at how our customers' demand is going to grow, and then we look at how much customer are going to bring resources, as Javier said, the consumers are becoming prosumers. So they produce also, and they have other distributed resources that they bring to the table. So their demand, their resources, we look at that, and then we say, okay, then how much energy we have to provide them from the utility perspective. That's the plan we build, and of course we stick to the 3 pillars of reliability, economical sustainability, and environmental responsibility. So typically this plan is 10 to 20 years, but the technology is changing so fast now, and the goals that our owner communities gave to us is so imminent, so near. We are updating this plan sooner than we typically would have. Typically, we are required to file every 5 years. We did the plan in 2016, so we were due in 2021, but we filed in 2020, and then now we were due in 2025, but we are doing it sooner this year as well. And the reason for this speed is obviously our goal is very near, and the technology is changing so fast. The development on the supply side and the consumer side is changing. Consumer preferences are changing as well. Our consumers are making decisions on their own. They're adopting technology faster than utilities or suppliers can. And then there are regulatory changes. For example, when we developed the 2020 IRP, the state of Colorado was thinking of bringing on regulations for carbon, and now it's in place, which requires all utilities to reduce their carbon emissions, CO2 emissions, by 80% by 2030 from relative to 2005. So those things are kind of asking us to do more frequent updates to our plan. Next slide, please. So IRP, building a resource plan, is a complex modeling process. We have all the assumptions. As I mentioned, we look at how much our customers are demanding, and then we say how much resources that they bring, how many will have solar panels, how many have electric vehicles, how many are going to put heat pumps, and stuff like that. And so based on that, that's our customer side. Then we say, what is the cost of electricity? What is the cost of power? And we make a forecast, long-term forecast. We hire a consultant to do that. That's a major assumption. And then we say, what is the cost of resources? What is the cost of renewable solar today? And how it's going to be next year, next 5 years, next 10 years? What is the cost of wind energy? So we have a resource cost in there as well. And then we have extreme weather models. Obviously, weather plays a key role in how we supply electricity. With today, like a day, everybody has the AC on, so the demand for electricity today is higher than yesterday. So weather is the key. But we look at some extreme weather, and I'll go into more details later. And also renewable profiles. Obviously, renewables are intermittent. We look at historically how on an hourly or 5-minute basis the wind has blown and solar has produced. So we use those profiles to develop the plans. So we put all these are some of the assumptions. There are many more. So we put in those assumptions in our model, Plexus. It's a industry standard model used by 400 utilities, not only in the US, but other parts of the country as well. It's a complex optimization model that, once we put all the assumptions and other parameters, will give us a resource plan, which is really a schedule of resource additions. So we will say in last year, our demand was about, as Javier showed, our peak demand was 707 megawatts. So in our load forecast, we say, hey, our load is probably growing at 1% or so, 1 to 2%. And then we say our customers today has about, at the Platte River system, about 35 megawatt of distributed solar. We make a forecast how many more customers are expected to build the solar. And then that's our customer side. With that, we build out like how much solar we need in 2024, 25, 26 to reach the target of 2030. It will give us the plan will give us a schedule of resource additions. Of course, the plan is the least cost, and we also gives us a carbon reduction. That's one of our kind of the objective. And then we also want to make sure reliability wise there is plenty of reserves. If we expect a load to be say 100 megawatt, we build a little bit cushion in there or reserve. Then once we build the basic plan, we test for reliability. Reliability testing we do two ways. One, we do three ways actually. First is dark comms. Dark comm we call, and I'll show you slide later on, is an extended period of when we will not have wind or solar, basically no renewable energy from wind and solar. It's dark, there is no solar, and it's calm, there is no wind. And that's very important because we have seen many of those events and we are likely to see that. We want to make sure those times you have enough power available. Extreme weather. So when extreme cold or extreme hot weather comes, the demand for electricity is increases and become more critical, especially in extreme cold weather. We want to make sure supply is there. So we test that. And then we test with the historical data. We look at what if the wind blows like it blew in 1990 or 2000. So every day the wind pattern is different. We've recorded those patterns for many years. So we run through different weather profiles, and on an annual basis, wind is much more volatile. From year to year, it could be as much as 10% difference, and from month to month could be as much as 30 to 40% high or low. So for example, month of March, month of spring this year was much more milder, much less windy than last year, was significantly higher. I think 20 to 30% more. So anyway, we test with the historical profiles, and we continue this process. We tweak some assumptions, we build a portfolio, we test for reliability until we are satisfied. So we are in the middle of this process right now. Next, please. So we have, because it's a very complex modeling process, we've hired a lot of consulting. We are a small utility. Like when I was at Dominion, my team had like 21 people. Here we are 3 people. We're a small utility. So we rely on a lot of consultants to do a lot of other work. And for example, we hired a consultant to do extreme weather modeling. This consultant had a lot of data scientists. They pulled last 50 years of data on 70 stations west of Mississippi, hourly data, what the temperature was, how much wind was, how much solar was. And from that, we look for extreme weather. They also build us, we hired a consultant to do a load forecast, like how the demand for electricity is expected to rise in our area. We hired a consultant for give us market prices. There was no market in Colorado before. This year, a real-time market started. Next year, in the next couple of years, there will be a full market. So we want to make sure what is the expected price of electricity in our area, so we can buy and sell economically when available. And then we also hired a consultant that told us how much of a spare capacity we need. So that's called planning reserve margin. Typically, utilities have been doing 15% reserve margin, which means if we expect the load to be 100 megawatt, you should have enough 115 megawatt resources will be enough. But now as we are going into renewable resources, which are very intermittent, and you don't know if the next hour or next minute there will be as windy or as solar or cloudy. So because of that, I think we wanted to know how much spare capacity we should keep. Beneficial electrification, this refers to how much of our customers we expect them to move to heat pumps. Heat pump provides electricity, heat as well as cold. So if we are making, we have all our customers, or most of our customers have ACs, so that's known. But we are seeing a winter load increasing because people are moving away from gas heating. That's a big unknown. So we are a consultant who looked at how the other parts of the country has moved on, like Massachusetts and some other areas of the country which gave incentives for heat pumps, and how their load have grown. Based on that, they're telling us this is what you can expect. So those are on the modeling side. The another uncertain area is the technology evaluation, technology side. We are looking at what technologies are on the horizon for power generation for our customers. What is their cost curve? I mean, obviously, when the technology starts, the cost is high, and then at some point it comes down, as we saw in the case of solar and wind. And then what time to maturity, when we expect that to be commercially viable. We also hired consultant to help us with the dispatchable technology evaluation. So as we retire our coal unit, we know wind is intermittent, and to provide electricity reliably, we want to see what are our options, what kind of resources we would need. Of course, there is a standard 4-hour storage battery, lithium-ion battery, and we have one that we are testing. But what other technologies are there? We want the flexibility, we want the lowest carbon intensity, and we want something that is proven. Similarly, we hired a consultant for distributed energy resources, like how many of our customers we should expect will have solar panels, how many electric cars we should expect in our area, how many of customers we will allow us to control their thermostats so that we can control their demand. So those things, we hired the experts who looked at how these things have evolved in other parts of the country, and that's the forecast we developed. So those are the kind of the studies we are doing with external consultants. They will form input to the IRP process and modeling. So now we talk about some challenges and opportunities for integration of renewables resources. So next, please. So this is a chart that we developed last year in 2022. We showed how we expect our energy mix is going to be starting in 2022. Blue line is hydro generation, and the scale is annual scale gigawatt hours. And then the green line is wind, and the orange is solar, and then the top little sliver is customer solar, distributed energy resources. And the dotted black line is what we expect to be our load, our demand from our customers. But many of our customers are adopting EVs, as well as electric heat pumps. So because of that, our demand is going to be higher. So the solid black line kind of shows our demand after we incorporate what changes customers are bringing. So with that, you can see kind of, in the next couple of years, we are really going to be ramping up to meet the 2030 target. And in 2030, you can see that we will have, on an annual basis, we'll have more renewable energy than our customer demand, slightly more on an annual basis. So this is our kind of in the end, with the integrated resource plan we are building now, it's going to look something close to this. This is how it will show us which year we should bring more and more solar, such that we are reliable, we are the lowest cost, and we are, make the most environmental impact. Next, please. So the challenge of renewable integration is renewable intermittency. Basically, wind doesn't always blow, and it's not sunny always. The coal plant used to run, it still runs all the time, whenever, 95% of the time. So the chart on the left kind of shows the renewable intermittency challenge on a day-to-day basis. This is a graph of a forecast of what we can expect in 2030. The solid black line shows our customers' load. You see, and then across a day in July. So at midnight, at 1 o'clock, the low demand is around a little over 400 megawatt. But as the night comes along, it becomes a little more cooler. The ACs are running a little slower, and so the demand goes down below 400. But when the sun comes up, it picks up and peaks around 5 p.m., 6 p.m. at about 750 megawatt-ish. The green line shows the generation of renewables. As you know, in winter, it's not, in dead of the summer, it's not very windy. So that overnight, we have about 100 megawatt or so generation. That's from wind and a little bit of a hydro we have. But when the day comes up, it becomes a little more windy, and of course, sun comes out, and then we start producing more renewable energy. The green line, and by 9 a.m., the green line crosses the black line. So that means we are producing more renewable energy than we need, and that happens till 5 p.m. And then the wind, the sun, while it's still sunny, but it's not windy anymore, and wind starts going down, and so the renewable generation comes down. And the dotted blue line shows the net renewable net load we have to meet outside of the resources from the renewable generation on a real-time basis. So you can see overnight we need about 350 megawatt or so all night, but then we have a lot of excess during daytime. We charge our batteries, but in the evening, I want you to pay attention what happens from 4 p.m. onward, 4 to 9. The demand keeps growing and growing really, really fast. So we need a resource there which we can tap on during those hours, and that's storage, that's dispatchable resource. So that's one challenge. Day to day, we do that. And of course, if you look at a day like spring, you're going to have this blue line will be negative most of the day and night, because it's very sunny, bright, the days are decently long, and it's very windy. So you will see a lot more excess energy on a spring day. And of course, on a winter day, the days are small, so solar will be small. Wind is kind of occasional, so picture would be somewhat similar.
I apologize. I think I advanced the slide a little bit sooner than what you were expecting, so I'm going to go back to the previous slide to this before.
Let me finish this, and we can go back. I think it's
okay.
It'll be very quick. So the right. So this is again renewable challenge. We talked about day-to-day challenge, but let's see the extreme weather challenge. This is the Valentine's week of 2021, when the winter storm Uri hit the country, and you all probably know what happened in Texas. Really, really sad. We were luckily we didn't lose power, but we were pretty close. And here is the situation. The black line shows what our demand was during those days. So it's February 11, February 12. The demand is like a normal day. It's morning, it's around 425 or something, and the evening is 470, 475 or something. And so that's a typical, and the demand kind of went up a little bit, but not a whole lot more. But look what happened to the renewable generation. It was very nice and windy on 12th, but sometimes during the afternoon, right in the middle of the day, the winds really stopped. It went from 200 to 50 megawatt, and the next about 80 hours, there was very little wind. And the solar was, first day was good, but next few days, next day a little bit, but then it was not at all, zero generation. So we call this event dark calm. So when we are planning, we want to make sure you have electricity during those days. And if you remember the temperature, and there was, I think my first or second winter here was really, really cold, like -20. I didn't get out of my house for almost a full week. Luckily, we are able to work from home. So, and we didn't lose power, but it was a really rough situation. And when we are planning, we want to make sure you have electricity for those days. And this is the type of data that we look for in extreme weather. When we looked at the data for the last 50 years, these are the type of events we look for. We can go back to the previous slide. I think we covered most of it. So yeah. We in our planning, that's the second bullet. we want to ensure reliability in every kind of weather every day. When the evening peaks kind of ramps up quickly, that's on a day-to-day basis, or we get 4 or 5 days of no storage. And what we need is, for that we need a long duration storage. That's kind of the linchpin. Unless we have a battery that can last for few days, like at least a week, we're not going to be able to. Current lithium-ion storage is 4 hours, so that's good for day to day. But for the dark comms, we need long duration energy storage. There is a lot of development in this area, but there is nothing available today. We need flexible DERs. We need our customer to listen to us when we send a signal. Don't charge now, or charge now, or reduce your demand. So we need flexible load. And then, unless the long duration storage comes out, we need a dispatchable generation, the electricity generating source that can kind of meet the short-term demand as well as the long-term demands for many days. So we can go forward now, please. Yeah, we covered this. So this is the other challenge in renewable, and I'm sure we all have seen the inflation since the start of the COVID. So this is what we were looking at on solar. We were getting bids for like a $20 round number megawatt hours back then, but that number is now in the 35 plus range for wind and solar both. So we've seen the price of wind and solar go up almost 70-80%, and this is in spite of IRA. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. Inflation Reduction Act kind of gave a lot of incentive to a renewable generation. But even with those generation, because of the global demand for renewables and huge demand from the country, within the country, and the requirement to local manufacturing is putting pressure on the prices, and this is what we're seeing now. And of course, since we are nonprofit, we are going to pass those costs on to our customers, the cities, and then it will go on to our consumers. So on the technology side, kind of the process or some opportunities and challenges, we can talk about that. Next, please. So the battery storage technology is the linchpin to go to 100% non-carbon. And currently we have 4-hour batteries available. The use case for that is a daily swings, as we saw overnight. There is some need. Evening, there is a huge need for 4 or 5 hours, but during daytime, there is excess. So you charge when it's windy and solar, and then you discharge during the daytime when you need it. So this is good. The challenge is the long duration storage, as we said. It's you cannot replace one for the other. For example, we did some quick math that if we use 4-hour storage batteries to provide power for just 1 day of that 3 days, the cost of providing that is going to be humongous. It's going to make more than double the customer rates. So the 4-hour battery cannot be used for long duration storage. That's kind of we need that to develop. Next, please. The future technologies that are looking very promising for 100% decarbonization is the hydrogen. There is a lot of talk about it. Government is giving incentives. European governments are giving a lot of incentives to develop hydrogen and use this hydrogen, make green hydrogen, which is non-carbon emitting, and then use that as a fuel in our gas turbines. The other technology that we are very keen to look at is carbon sequestration. Basically, you burn natural gas and you take the exhaust of the natural gas and you take the carbon out of it, carbon CO2, not carbon, and then put that into ground. There is a lot of work. This technology has been developed for the last 30 years. It's still not commercial, but a lot of research and development going on in this area. And also then renewable fuels, where we basically you have hydrogen, renewable hydrogen, you can turn that into natural gas, or you take the natural gas from the food waste or garbage or the county's waste disposal facilities. So there is a lot of, you collect the natural methane from that, that's renewable, and you could use that. So our strategy is we will keep an eye on these technologies. We keep looking at, we keep educating ourselves, and then we test and pilot when they are in that phase, and then we adopt when they're commercially viable, which our definition of commercially viable is a few utilities are using those technologies before us. And the challenge is, oh, you know, there is $1 million question is when we think the, CO2, hydrogen will become commercial. With the amount of money IRA is giving, it's probably next 5 within this decade. And also the other challenge is cost, how much it will cost, how the cost curve will decline. Can we look at how the solar cost decline, how the wind cost decline, or there will be a new curve? We don't know, but that's assessment we have to make, and that's the challenge we have to face in our plan. What should we assume? And that's why we hire the consultants as well. Next, please. So here is this kind of a little bit a digression from the flow. Here is what the distributed sources we are considering. We are considering energy efficiency. We have like where you work with us, we work with the utilities and our customers to kind of improve the efficiency of the existing homes and businesses. That's, you know, the one of the main source of reducing the demand. Then we look at electrification. I know our customers are buying electric cars, but can we use that demand flexibly? Can we, is there a vehicle to grid option as well, where we, you know, we tell them to charge when there is excess energy, and then we can draw on when we need it, and that part. And then the next is the distributed generation, the solar panels on our customers' houses. And then can we kind of the next one is demand response, we call it. Basically, if we can change your thermostat, make the life a little more uncomfortable, you have make the thermostat a little higher in the summer and a little bit lower in the winter, and obviously that will save us a lot of energy in real time for a few hours. And then, you know, a lot of our customers are building batteries, buying batteries and for their own backup, but can they give us the access to that so we can use it as well? So those are kind of the main distributed energy resources we are looking at in our resource plan. So, and to summarize, the resource planning modeling is a very complex and challenging process. We are in the middle of the modeling, and we are engaging industry experts. We will be going to coming to you in the next listening session, or a communication session, I would call it, as Javier said, in a few months, and then in spring, to kind of tell you where we are, what our findings are. But right now we are in the middle of this modeling process, kind of going through that loop. And as I said, for new technologies, which we incorporate the technologies that are proven, we monitor the emerging technologies, and we pilot that are promising. And we love to hear from you how we can improve our planning process or our assumptions. So any input you can give us today verbally or in writing to our email or in any other forum, because we are in the middle of modeling, and we'd love to hear from you and take your input, so that the plan we build is the least cost plan, the most reliable plan, but also kind of meets your needs, aspirations, and desires as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that great presentation. Daryl, I owe you an apology. I missed that you wanted to introduce these speakers, and I'm sorry for that, but do you want to say something before we jump into questions?
Sure, yeah, just really quickly, Javier stole all my thunder, so I'm not going to repeat too much of what he said, but I really do want to reiterate that Platte River and the city of Longmont, LPC, and frankly, the other three cities as well, we are partnered with them. We are attached at the hip. There is somebody at LPC who talks to somebody at Platte River multiple times on a daily basis. So I just want to make sure that it's clear that it's not Platte River who's doing something up in Fort Collins and we're not sure what they're doing. And, a lot of times, the stuff that Masood gets into is pretty technical. And so we maybe are going to, lean on down a little bit for some of the technical expertise as well as the consultants that he mentioned. But I just want to reiterate that, the direction that Platte River is taking is given to them directly from the board, and we have 2 of the 8 board members. So just to reiterate that, we've got a good relationship with them, and we're going to be doing a bunch of community meetings with Platte River to take the IRP out to some targeted surgical presentations this fall. So I just wanted to say that and really thank them for making the time to talk with you today, and also to thank the board for giving us the time. Thanks.
Okay, open the floor for questions. Jim, and then Charles.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation. I found that to be really interesting. And there's some things that made me feel really good and things that made me feel a little bit concerned. But I was a little bit curious. This spring, Colorado, to this point, as far as I know, is not producing any electricity from geothermal sources, despite probably having a lot of potential in the mountains. But this spring, there was a company that announced that in Weld County, they're going to be building an experimental geothermal plant to try to, they claim that they'll be able to produce industry or kind of utility scale power from. And I'm wondering, that didn't show up on any of the potentials. I'm wondering if PRP has been involved at all or is in contact with that potential. I'm not sure if it's necessarily in the service area, but I know that some of the potential power providers obviously are a variety of places.
So, like I said, this is a proven technology for. I mean, there are a lot of power plants on geothermal, but it's kind of new to our area, as you mentioned. So it's on our radar, but unless we see some, pilots or programs or the economics of it, we will not be. That's why it's not included in our plan. When they build a pilot, they prove that the economics of it at that time it will come. That's first thing. The second, and probably more important, I think we have one of the lowest cost renewables, as I said before. Even with the cost increase, $30–40 wind and solar is amazingly priced, and both of them they complement each other. So what typically geothermal is a kind of a base load plant. What we need, unless it's really economical, we will welcome it. But our needs is where we can meet the intermittency of the wind and solar, because we have abundant and low cost wind and solar in our part of the country. While in California, where they don't have a lot of wind unless they go offshore, which is unproven, very expensive, they have daily, they need a lot of base load. On the East Coast or other parts of the country, they need base load. But for our needs, we feel we need more intermittent, we need something that can complement the intermittency of renewables.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that was a really good point that you made in the presentation. It's just that because geothermal can be, it doesn't care about the seasons and doesn't care about the weather or the time of day or the sunshine or anything like that. It seems like it could be, even just having that baseline could be very, very helpful for a lot of these things. But the other reason that I bring it up is because, at least in my reading of it, I'm only tangentially associated with people who do geothermal exploration and things like that. One of the main reasons that Colorado hasn't exploited some of the geothermal resources that we know that we have, hot springs all over the place, is because the regulatory framework is just not really there yet. And so the exploration project in Weld County, that's going to be one of their first hurdles. And it just seems that if it was something that, I don't know if there's ways that we could help encourage that to actually take place if even, you know, I'm not sure what power we have or what influence we have, but it seems like if it's clear from some of the utility providers that that could actually be, you know, having hundreds of megawatts of baseline all year, all the time would be wonderful, it seems. And if
Right.
that's actually possible, it seems like if some of the steps are these regulatory processes, which I'm sure PRP has a lot of experience with, it might be a good thing for us to at least be supportive of.
Yeah, good points. Again, I will say, you know, we have been approached. We are in high-level conversations. It's not public. We're listening. But the other important, and we'll, you know, talk to a lot of technology vendors, and they come to us. We listen to them. But more importantly, I want to make a point. If it's not in our service territory, of the 4 cities that we serve, or doesn't touch our transmission, we have to pay a transmission cost to that. That will add another, could add 20-30%. So economics will be a little bit more unfavorable. So those are, you know, important things for us.
Thank you very much. Yeah, the only they have these maps of where they're going to put it, and it just shows Weld County, which is ginormous. So that
Right.
hasn't helped me at all. But thank you very
Yeah.
much.
Thank you. Good question.
Yeah, and I'll just add a quick point and then ask a couple questions. And you know, the other type of geothermal energy, you know, is ground source heat pumps.
Mhm.
And those are you know, you can put those anywhere you want, basically. And it reduces HVAC costs by about 70%. And there isn't any regulatory issues, but there's very little incentives or help to help customers lower the initial, you know, high price of installation. So there's another great way we could help, you know, where geothermal could help us.
Mhm.
So really appreciate the presentation. That was super informative and helpful, and appreciate all the time and effort that went into that. I had a few questions. When you're doing the reliability testing in this Plexus model, did that just cover the, for example, the service area of Platte River, or because now that you're interconnected with Western Energy and Balance Market and the Southwest Power Pool, now the intermittency issue becomes much lower, right? Because you're geographically much more diverse, and the statistical variation is going to be much smaller.
Yeah, very good question and very technical. So I'm impressed, Charles. You are very, you know, intimately familiar with this. Yes, the market does help, but we have the history of 2021, when we saw at that time we bought natural gas, which is usually $2-3 per MMBTU for $80 per MMBTU, but we couldn't get the gas. So when this type of extreme weather comes, I think a lot of times it's covers broader region. That's one thing. So yes, you are interconnected, but the availability is not guaranteed. It's possible, but it's not guaranteed. That's number one. Number two, even in a market, the market manager will ask every utility to bring their own reserve margin. So we will make a load forecast, and they will say, you need to have your own 15% spare capacity or 20%, whatever that number out to be. So ultimately, each utility is responsible for their own load. So that's how in a market it works. In terms of our modeling, we try to mimic that in a model as the best we can. And what we say is, when the DARCOM happens, you know, we are connected to the market, but the probability is 1/3 we will get the full import. We can import all our physical capability. 1/3 probability will get only 1/3, and there is 1/3 probability we get 0. So it's a very high level assumption we make. We could become more fancy on a triangle distribution or normal distribution, but we make a fairly simple call because we're making a lot of assumptions, and you know, we want to make something we understand, we explain to our management and to our customers. So 1/3, 1/3. So there is 1/3 of the time you're not going to have anything, but other 1/3 of the time you will have everything, and that is kind of rooted in some historical data as well.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah, I understand that. And the, like ERCOT, one of the big issues with ERCOT was
Right.
they weren't interconnected. And so that made them even more vulnerable. Of course, the other regionals may not have been able to help as much because there was some also weather issues going on with in the other areas, but interconnection could help some. Hey,
Right.
one other, I have tons of questions. I'm going to have to limit it, but when you were showing the composition in 2018 versus 2023, hydro had dropped from like 15% down to like 8.5% or something like that. Coal had dropped from like 61% to 55%. And I was wondering, was some hydro taken offline, or was that just growth in other sources?
Javier, you want me to?
I'll kick it off, Masood, and I probably won't be as technical, so I apologize, Charles. But what I will say is that we're managing dwindling levels of water that's feeding into our hydro generation. And so, we've seen that from a historical standpoint. And so as we, do these models and we'll continue to do them as we work towards 2030 and beyond, we have to calculate for that. So in the chart that Masood showed in his part of the presentation, where it showed all the layers of the different generation resources, water, although it's our baseline and it's fairly consistent through, there's a slight decline, right? And so you're correct, the pie chart will shift as we're introducing these new mixes, and so the percentages will change, but just naturally we're also managing dwindling levels of hydro generation, which is something we're trying to mitigate as much as possible on a legislative front. The Colorado River has become quite the contentious conversation across the western part of the United States. California flexes a lot of muscle when it comes to that space. And so us, along with the other western states like Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah, we're all trying to work together to definitely get our fair share. And so that's kind of the work that myself and Lee are working on, constantly. And so keeping an eye on that. But that's kind of on the policy side. Masood, I'm not sure if there's anything else to add on the more technical side of things.
No, I think you covered it. Basically, we have a hydro allocation that we get from WAPA, Western Area Power Administration, and they look at the rainfall and how much rainfall is. As you know, last year we had some record lows. And since then, we had a very wet season all across the West, most of it. So we have replenished. But because of this, and the whole of the West is on a 21-year drought, long-term drought. And when our planning, we kind of consider that it will go slightly lower than where it is now.
Yeah, sometimes hydro is, it's our longest or our oldest renewable that we use in power generation, but sometimes it's considered almost like baseline.
Right.
But it probably shouldn't be treated that way because there's the annual and seasonal variability and this general decline we're seeing. So so that's interesting and kind of unfortunate. And then I guess one other question. So you mentioned this blip that we've seen since 2023 and the increased cost for wind and solar being due to increased demand. I think that's part of it, but when I look at like PV spot prices and discussions about those kinds of things, it's like there's a huge, we had huge supply chain issues with PV. We're not completely out of that yet. There's a lot still going on. The prices are still higher, but a lot of things have, a lot of prices have dropped quite a bit. Glass prices have dropped. Shipping, cargo ships from China, those prices have dropped dramatically. So I think we're going to go back to our normal price decline curves pretty soon.
Well, that'll be a great news. And as you saw, we are building kind of a dollar cost averaging, if you were to use that term. Jason told me that, I love that. That's what we are going to do. So we built the wind we have now, 225 megawatt. I mean, that was one of the cheapest wind in the country. I could safely say that. Then the prices went up. We bought a little bit more, so we are going to continue to buy between now and 2030. So the decline will be built into our, the cost that our customers pay.
Yeah, definitely. Dollar cost averaging depends upon buying less when high prices are high and buying more when prices are low. So yeah, if we're doing that, that's fantastic. And if these price decline curves, continue, I mean, battery energy storage has dropped 90% or something in the last 10 years. Solar has dropped in that same range, about 90% over the last 10 years. And if we continue on those learning curves and declining cost curves, maybe we can pass on some lower rates to customers. I mean, solar is now the cheapest form, at least at utility scale and commercial scale. Residential rooftop is still expensive, but there might be opportunities to drop rates. That might be heresy saying that here, but
well,
could happen.
I mean, we are a nonprofit, so whatever we'll use our best judgment. The board members will kind of make the final decisions, but those costs will pass on to you, the customers.
And that's,
And the
that's
savings.
And really that goes back to what I had said at the very top of the presentation, the fact that we're a community-owned public power utility. That's one of the stark differences between how we're structured versus an IOU. And so we're not looking to, help shareholders or, fund the investors. At the end of the day, we're community invested, community owned and community invested. And so taking the most responsible approach when it comes to that. So and we have a great finance team who in addition to all the resource planning modeling that we're doing here, we're talking very specifically about the technical aspects on the resource mix, but there's definitely the financial component that's attached to it. It's a parallel race. And so doing all the financial models. So those are constant conversations that we're having, Charles, and when and if there's those opportunities, you can very much guarantee we're going to run down that path.
That'd be fantastic. Again, thanks so much for the presentations, and this is really exciting. I'm really neat to see the progress and the move towards higher renewable composition and all the efforts that are being made on that end. So thank you.
Thank you.
Jim, I see your hand.
Yeah, I promise I'll be quick, and you can blame Charles for this because he reminded me of something when he talked about the ground source heat pumps. One of the interesting things that I was reading about this geothermal company is that what is the college in Grand Junction? Grand Mesa?
Colorado Mesa University.
Colorado Mesa University. Colorado Mesa University uses ground source heat pumps for all of their major buildings. And one of the things that got me thinking of is that in our area, you showed us all the supply and demand curves, and obviously a lot of that is our residential consumers who are using electricity, but some of those might be big facilities. Colorado State, I don't know what, I have no idea what other large industry consumers there are. And Colorado Mesa University is getting some millions of dollars from the state to help kind of expand this thing. And I'm wondering if when we're thinking about trying to maybe be more efficient from an energy point of view, there's obviously things that home consumers can do, but is there an idea of how many like big fish there might be that if we decided to try to help somebody install, ground source heat pumps or some other thing that could actually take a big chunk of the demand out? Because things like ground source heat pumps are very expensive to do on a home by home basis. But if you're doing them on a large facility, then they become more profitable. And do you have a sense for how much of that energy demand is, homes, and how much of it might be some large facilities that maybe we could target?
I would be, we can make a guess, and I don't have the number top of my head because we measure at the wholesale level. So we measure electricity when we supply you at a big substation. So the separation of how much is industrial use, how much is large commercial versus residential, I think the cities will have a better idea, and every city could be slightly different. The city of Longmont probably knows a little bit more, because we don't set, we look at the wholesale, we call it wholesale load. So
Great, thank you. Susan, did you have?
I was just gonna confirm what Masood said, that, we do track our commercial and industrial energy consumption separate from our residential. It kind of helps us figure out what types of programs. So, Jim, you're talking about, do we know what that potential is and how would we incent that? And I think we do take those things into consideration, but we also want to make sure that we're taking into consideration how that plays into the larger Platte River picture with the other owner communities. So, kind of the more that we know, the more we put in the pool to help with that modeling. But it is a good point. Thanks.
Yeah, Charles, I see your hand. Are there other board members who have questions? And seeing none, Charles, I'm hoping to we've got a couple more things on the agenda, so within 5 minutes to move on to the next
Yeah,
topic.
just a real quick question. So one thing I've noticed is battery energy storage systems. Some of the wait times on those things are 2 or 3 years now. So do we get on the purchase list early, or?
We are well, I mean, we are doing dollar cost averaging. So we did a competitive bidding last year, and because of the supply chain, people were not committing to prices. I cannot say more detail, but we are, kind of in the process of competitive procurement. And so we have some bids we are evaluating, and then they are looking at, implementation in the next 2-3 years. So I couldn't say anything more, but we are evaluating bids since last year.
It's good, because the delays, because of just there's so much demand for battery energy storage right now.
Right.
It's super high, and then you have the average interconnection wait times are so long now. I don't know, maybe because Platte River controls that, those wait times can be much shorter than in some of the other utility systems.
So because of the separation of transmission from this function, we are the same queue. We cannot tell our transmission, connect my plant first. So there are other people who want to connect with our transmission system also. So whenever we are starting a project, we make a request, and then, like, other people could be ahead of us. So if their project matures, they will always stay ahead of us. So that's the wholesale interconnection process. Now, as part of the storage, we are also exploring, could we do some storage at the, utility, at the owner communities at the Longmont and Fort Collins level. So in that case, obviously, it could be a little faster, but those things are being talked about as we review the offers, the competitive procurement process.
Thank you.
Great. Other questions? We have 3 minutes now. All right. Well, thank you, Javier, Masood. That was a great presentation. Really appreciate all of the detail that you went into. Appreciate you taking the time to answer all of our very detailed questions, and look forward to hearing from you in the future.
Absolutely. We just really, again, appreciate the time, to the board, to you, Kate, for allowing this time on your agenda. And both Masood and I have said it, but we can't emphasize it enough. Please utilize the resources that we're making available. Our webpage, prpa.org. You can just simply remember that. We have a link to it, but it's /2024 IRP, plus our email as well. We have a live FAQ there. We're continuing to revise that on a weekly basis as we go through these presentations and collect all your questions. Of course, some questions may take a little bit longer to answer than others, as as you can imagine, we get some good ones. And so we want to make sure we provide those questions out there. And then, like I said, we will certainly be communicating with you and the LPC staff, the City of Longmont staff, on our next community engagement meeting, which will be happening in the fall. We'll certainly utilize every platform. And if there's any other organizations that you want us to be at, please communicate with staff or with us directly. We're happy to definitely bake that into our plan as well. But again, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank
Good to
you.
see you all. Take care. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. That brings us to public invited to be heard, but I understand that, Heather, we don't have anyone.
We don't have anyone who, the ones who are on the call right now are just observing today.
Great. Well, thank you all for being here. Okay, on to other business. The compost resolution. Jim, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, I hope people had a chance to look at revision draft 2. I hope that I incorporated all the comments that people had. And then I also, you'll notice I did add a little bit of another emphasis to it, which was that I was watching a CPR report on A1 Organics and this whole decision, and they were showing these videos of them like pulling plastic and glass and all these things out of all their compost trucks. And it became clear that I didn't want to sound like we were just blaming A1 Organics for changing their policy, and that maybe a big part of the problem is that we need to be doing some better education and or policy changes on our side to make sure that the compost stream is clean. So again, I have no ego in this. So if you think it's stupid or if you think it sounds bad, please feel free to tell me. That's one of the joys of my job is I get peer reviewed all the time by very mean people, and so I'm very used to it. But I would love to know if people had ideas or people are in general support of it, or if I misspelled a common word again. But any comments would be wonderful. But that's basically what it is. I added a few links. I tried to kind of point out where certain things that we're asking for actually fit into the sustainability plan. And there were 3 parts of the sustainability plan that deals with waste that I thought were really central to this whole resolution. So there's things that the city has already said are important. That's why I tried to include them. And then also I added this part about us partnering with A1 Organics maybe to try to reduce the contamination of the compost stream.
Great, thank you. Per our inclusion statement, let's all try not to be very many people when we're commenting on this. Are there any questions or comments?
You could just be an unnamed reviewer then. That's how you do it. You just
okay.
Reviewer number 1.
Perfect. Lisa, I see your hand.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I did want to, I had a couple of comments, some my own and some from Charlie Kamenides to pass along. I appreciate you mentioning that. I do think kind of reframing a little bit to be around partnering with A1, I think is going to be really important because they are not doing that because they want to, they're doing that because of contamination. So I think that would be really helpful because we really want to focus on maintaining a good collaborative partnership with A1. And then I think there's some opportunity with that. Charlie had mentioned in that looks like 1, 2, 3, 4th, whereas that the changes severely reduce and limit the types of amounts of and types of materials. In our analysis, at least from our waste stream, the amount itself in that change in policy isn't huge. It is worthwhile, but it is substantive enough to talk about. But I think Charlie brought up the point that there's still a lot of yard waste and food waste that we don't capture now, and that's even a bigger slice of that pie. And so I think adding something about the importance, and maybe this is making another whereas, but adding something about the importance of including other approaches along with this around that education piece in particular, in being critical and reaching our zero waste goals. So kind of acknowledging that this is one piece and there's still other pieces that are important overall.
So I'm sorry. sorry, I just want to make sure that I'm getting what you're saying. So
Yep.
what you're saying is that even so, okay, so that whereas for me is just based on like how full my compost bucket is every 2 weeks now. It's like, oh, there's all these things I can't compost anymore.
Mm.
But what you're saying is that we're even if you ignore that stuff, there's this enormous amount of yard and food waste that we weren't capturing even before any of these changes came.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
so that the educational component and partnering with everyone could be more than just reducing the contamination in the waste stream. It's actually getting people or getting the more of that organic material into the compost stream.
Yeah.
Is
Yep.
that okay?
Yep. Definitely. Yep. And I mean, you can leave it or take it out. That word severely, I think it's the, it's just a matter of debate, I would say, of like what the threshold for severe is. But, and if Francie is on, I don't know if she has that number off the top of her head, and we could share that. And that's just our analysis for our waste stream. It might be bigger for others too, especially I would think in the commercial sector maybe, but yeah. And then the last one, and I think you spoke to this, but maybe adding a clause under the therefore section of, highlighting our continued partnership with A1 in order to have successful composting, supporting the education to reduce contamination and increasing diversion, and then supporting state level legislation that can also help address some of those issues as well. And then in the negotiation, the comment about renegotiating with A1, and this is maybe what you're speaking to before, it's really not an issue of negotiating with A1. They're the biggest industrial composter in the state. And so maybe there's just like that maybe is kind of reframing around the kind of partnership piece.
Okay.
And then the last one is really helping to support or encourage the council and commissioners to provide the directive to proceed on a regional facility somewhere closer located. And there are some options in working with A1 on something like that. And I can send these to you too. I know that's kind of a lot to process, but
yeah, no, that'd be wondering some of the comments that had come up. I forget who had said them in previous times, was about A1's technology and whether or not they actually had the proper technology to accomplish all the things that we wanted to compost.
Yeah, and from Charlie's standpoint, they are working to improve their infrastructure with that technology. So they're in the process of doing that.
So you could send me these, because I have notes, but I'd like to make sure I don't.
I'll send
that'd
you
be
it.
wonderful.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Great. Michelle.
I think it's great so far. I don't really know how the process works or like where the details, like if city council decides some of the, basically I was wondering if in this, if we put, like if it could be like a process of, right now they just don't take any paper products. That's kind of like, I'm always like using my paper towels and I'm like, oh yeah, I can't throw this. But it's like the most compostable, like compared to some of the plastic made out of compostable material. So I wasn't sure if we can like ease back into that and kind of
like a phased reintroduction of like the easiest things to the hardest
like
things.
starting, because of course the plastic is going to be the hardest and get the most mixed up with. People still sometimes put actual plastic in or think it's compostable, something like that. So if we could like phase it, like, something like
coffee filters and paper towels are fine. And then we'll move on. And then if we do well with that, we will get okay to
then we can then we're on their good list. But I just wasn't sure like if we put that in or
that's a really interesting point.
Council, if they decide that, then they can decide the process. Just wanted to say that.
I think I could think of some language to actually imply that as an option. Actually, I think that's a really good idea of being like, all right, well, you're right that there are things that are easier and harder to confuse when people are putting stuff in the compost bin. And
Yeah, like if they could just do
like-
paper plates and
yeah, like paper
Towels.
is kind of a, yeah, pizza boxes and other paper things. And then like if we graduate from that, we can move
Yeah,
on to the
people seem to
takeout
be
containers.
getting that,
Yeah.
then maybe we can convince them.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Yeah. Thank you.
Great. Other thoughts or comments here? I think it's great. Jim, thank you for putting so much time into this. Well, I'm excited to get it all together.
To see draft 3.
Yeah,
I know.
exactly.
Draft 3 is going to be just like papers I write for my job, man. Third version. Gone to review a couple times. This is great. I'm right in my wheelhouse. I feel very comfortable with this.
Fantastic.
Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it. And if you have additional comments, I think you have to send them through Heather. But if there are things that you thought of, I'd love to hear them. And if you've written anything up as well, because I know that my memory won't always remember things. So.
If you know Jim's email address, you can send it directly to him as well, as long as you don't have more than 3 of you on the email.
All right.
Great.
Sounds good.
More than 2, sorry, not 3.
More than 2. I was just about to say, is that more than 2? Got it. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. And that takes us to items from staff. Francie, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Board Francie Jackson, Sustainability Coordinator. And before I jump into my presentation, I did find an old email when that similar question was asked about the percentage that was estimated of what was being composted, but what isn't. We did a 2019 analysis of a life cycle analysis, and we had shredded paper, old corrugated cardboard, compostable paper, and BPI certified compostable materials. I kind of grouped those together. It was just under 1,000 tons in 2019 for both residential and commercial, and only about, so in that, out of everything that's sent to be composted, it was about 14%. So that's a couple years old. We've also since then have gotten more accurate data from the commercial side, since we have more extensive reporting from Retrack now than we did have in 2019 from commercial. So they take that number with a grain of salt. So I just wanted to say that. But I'll transition to my presentation, which is on the Sustainability and Climate Action Mid-Year Report. I believe you all were here earlier this year when we, this is our biannual report that we combine some highlights and send it to council. Usually we send you this along with a very large spreadsheet that goes into everything. We did not send the spreadsheet for the mid-year report this time because we are still working on Longmont indicators that we presented last time. Our current goal is to try to do more of a soft launch by the end of September so that people can look at this report and they can also go to Longmont indicators. So that's why you did not get the large spreadsheet this time and just the summarized report. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm not going to walk through everything. I'm just going to kind of pull out some highlights for you all. And then if you had specific sections, I do want to highlight there's a couple sections in text in pink that are edits from the version that you all saw. They're very minor things, but I just wanted to show that there's been some edits. And then I've also received some more grammatical edits from our comms team that haven't been integrated yet. So the main page is just our landing page. The first page, we always highlight items from the Climate Action Recommendations Report. I specifically wanted to highlight these 2 extreme heat related initiatives. One is extreme heat resilience through energy efficiency and building electrification. The one highlight I want to call out is that this used to say electrification enhanced heat resilience, but we also want to highlight that it helps improve whole home health, safety, and comfort. And we're also working on a heat mapping and community-driven cooling solutions. The heat mapping occurred just a couple of weeks ago, so we participated. I heard heard it went really well. And that hopefully in a couple months we'll have that data. So that's very exciting. We are continuing with Climate Action Sundays. We had Our Water, Our Future one this past February. Hopefully you'll be able to attend. We have one in September and one in October coming up, focused on transportation and energy. The Equitable Climate Action team is continuing to grow. I want to just highlight that this year they got much more involved in community events and participating and volunteering at those events. Going in now, this kind of the rest of the report's organized by the sustainability plan topic areas. Some specific highlights here. We're continuing to work regionally on air quality issues, continuing the city's housing rehabilitation program. You may have remembered from last year and previous reports, it was on hold for a little bit, so they're fully staffed and up and running. The Sustainability Opportunities Lifestyle Leadership Program is also starting to expand more now that we have more staff, as well as the Sustainable Business Program. They do have a celebration coming up in October to honor all the new participants and everyone participating in the Sustainable Business Program. I want to note a highlight here that was a mistake on my part. This used to say, this is specifically the To Go Where program was offered to all businesses. The ones who happened to participate all happened to be BIPOC owned, but it was open to all businesses to be able to participate. So that's just a quick wording change there. A lot of things happening in the energy sector, working to expand efficiency upgrades for small businesses, continuing making progress on installing AMI meters. Natural environment, continuing to support increase in tree canopy, using organic fertilizer on Roosevelt and Gardens Acres Park, as well as our open staff is doing a lot to protect our local and natural environment. I will get rid of that weird squiggle that's there that I just noticed. And then our last section, there's, I think, exciting, trying to keep working towards a micro transit service that can help expand micro mobility in Longmont. As you all know, we passed the first recycling ordinance. We're also up to about 50% Green Star school participation and are hoping to launch 3 schools this fall. So we're now on track to be complete by end of 2026. And then if you live in the Kensington neighborhood, you may have already heard of this, but there's a very exciting growing Water Smart initiative that's partnered with Art in Public Places to protect the Unity Project, which is a art in public places that's sculpture that's been there since the 1990s. They're to help protect it. They're ripping out a lot of the grass and replacing it with a waterized garden, and they're really getting the community involved and helping to determine the design and actually participating in the planting. So those some highlights. Any questions or comments on this mid-year report?
Ralph.
Nancy, thank you. Quick question. As you know, this is my first year on the board and I'm seeing some of these things, at least now for the second time. Who is the audience for this document? Is the public part of the audience for this document?
Yes, the primary audience, I would say, is City Council, the board, but we do make it available and share it with the public.
Right. It's an incredible document, and I read it through carefully and actually have a couple pages of notes, and because I'm educating myself along the way. But yeah. I'm only offering this as an innocent bystander. If I was a citizen of Longmont, which I am, and this was of interest to me, it's incredibly dense. And between the visuals and the text, I just wonder whether it would make sense, and maybe there is something like this of a Cliff's Notes version that gives somebody who has interest in this but doesn't have the time to wade through this. It is truly incredible to see all the things the city is doing, but it's pretty hard to access that through this without a really focused read of this. And I just feel like the public should really have as much access. It's important, obviously, for the administration of our city through the city council and staff and stuff. But I'm just wondering how this can be more palatable and available in a simpler form that might attract more residents to understand the incredible work our city is doing.
Yeah. I'm laughing because this was our attempt at a simpler. This was the but I did, and I haven't had a chance to share this with Lisa yet, but we recently I got a really good comms feedback from someone who doesn't work in sustainability, is on comms staff, who really gave me some good feedback on how to make it a little bit clearer if you're coming from the perspective of knowing nothing. So we might not make those updates in the mid-year report, but I was going to explore that with Lisa about how to just make, if you're not as familiar with our sustainability and climate action plans. But I would definitely be very curious on, since this is kind of the abbreviated version in summary of everything that's happening. And the Longmont indicated website I showed you all last month is the really detailed. And Ralph, I still have it on my list we might not have it ready by the launch, but I really do love your video idea from last month.
Thank you.
But yeah, I'm curious, how could we make it more of a kind of cliff note, since that was kind of our attempt here.
It's still pretty dense. I mean, I'd be interested if other people, but I know for most of the board members, they have a lot of familiarity with this. I just think, going through the highlights, giving them a little of a roadmap, and then filling it in a little bit in a few pages, in big print, with less graphics, just a few eye-catching things to make it simpler that hits home. Like if I said to you, you've got 5 minutes, Francie, to tell 80,000, 100,000 people what the city is doing, how would you do that? Again, others may not feel this way, and this just may be to me. It's just that I still find it not as accessible to the public. And if that's only a small portion of the intention of it, then we don't need to take more time with it. But if it is, then I'd love to see us thinking about continuing to, even if it's not as complete as we would like for it to be, but it draws somebody to the next step to want to take a look at this document, then we would be accomplishing, something on that level.
Maybe like an infographic would be something that would be really approachable, that folks could look at a glance and say, oh my gosh, like look at all of the different things, just like a 1-pager, 2-pager, just highlights, that was, colorful and catchy. That might get the point across with a little less text. And it's funny, Francie, because I was going to suggest the website as a way to access all the information, but you're saying that's the detailed stuff.
Yeah, and I guess the Longmont indicators that we showed you all last month, I think that's really what we want to be the primarily public facing. This report is like kind of that condensed summary for council and for you all to kind of say, to help kind of pull out the key highlights. I think that's still helpful for the community to have that kind of key highlights, and I think we can explore also having the more detailed Longmont indicators website. Is there some text we don't need in this summary report anymore that we can pull out and focus on the main highlights? I do like the infographic idea, but if this goes on the website, we're really trying to improve our ADA accessibility, and an infographic is a little harder to make screen reader accessible, which might make it look, so that's just something we would have to keep in mind.
Yeah, makes sense. Jim, you've got an idea.
Well, well, I was just wondering, the idea that Ralph had last time about the video, I was wondering, I mean, would that be something that could be accomplished with a little video that kind of describing these things with the graphic? So this is something if people like to sit down and look at it and read, because I found it very, I liked it. I got a lot out of it, and I thought it was easy to follow, but yeah, everybody has different learning styles or information styles, and would that be something where another little video could also kind of accomplish that? And that would be something that people could, and I know it's very easy to tell people to make videos when I don't have to do it, but I don't know if that might be easier than trying to condense all this information onto even less space.
Yeah, that could be one way we could have that on our landing page, both have a video on the new Longmont indicators of how to navigate the site. But then every time we do one of these reports, we have a link to the report and also have a summary highlight video. Yeah, I think me doing it in English is quick and easy. But if we want to make it again as accessible, and we're trying to make Longmont indicators really bilingual, and then so if we would have to factor in whether we would want to do that twice a year, maybe just for the annual report. But that's a
Thank you, Francie.
I really appreciate it, Francie. Thank you. Okay, there are no other questions or comments there. The next item on the agenda is items from the board. Does anybody have anything to bring up? Hearing none, I will move on to the next item, which is items for council, and our council member is no longer here, so we'll jump over to informational items and board correspondence, which is my cue to tell you that there's correspondence at the end of your board packet. Please review those, but it's not something that we need to discuss. And that brings us, friends, to the end of the agenda for adjournment. Is there a move to adjourn? Motion to adjourn.
I will move to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
I
Thanks, everybody, for being here. Good to see y'all.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank
See
you,
you.
Have a good one.
everybody.
Bye-bye.